Fantastic to have you at our 5th annual Women's Hemispheric Network Forum in Miami. And it's the first time we're hosting the WH Forum at the University of Miami, one of ASCOA's key partners and in this beautiful space. The focus of today's forum will be leadership and how we can foster diversity within our companies, organizations, and communities. As many of you know, Miami is my home, and we've had a robust ASCOA agenda for the last 14 years. And for those of us who live here, we know what a special and diverse community we have that sits at the crossroads of the Americas. Our community was recently marred by a tragic event that took place just 45 minutes from here just last week, where we all share the sadness of the senseless act, and others like it. We wonder how and when they will cease. In response to this tragedy, though, we've seen a remarkable youth-generated social movement demanding immediate attention and change. These students are showing us that a bottom-up form of leadership may be as effective as traditional top-down, that expecting change and waiting for change from the top is no longer an option. The voices of students and young professionals must be heard if we are going to teach and protect our children, achieve gender parity, and promote women's leadership. We're delighted to have a diverse group of professionals here today to discuss what we can do to make this happen today. With that in mind, we have a great panel this afternoon with some truly admired and effective leaders who have made it their personal missions to promote diversity in their respective arenas, and a keynote from Dr. Susan Clancy of INCI on lessons in leadership that will no doubt inspire, but also lead into our signature table discussions with all of you. However, before we start, I want to thank our lead sponsor of today's WHN Forum, Medtronic, as well as Microsoft for being a table leader supporter. We appreciate their commitment and support in promoting diversity and gender parity and their partnership with ASCOA. Today's program is also part of our 2018 Miami Program Series, and I'd like to thank our sponsors for their thought leadership in working with us throughout the year to create important dialogue. Thank you to Chevron, Citi, Cisco, Microsoft, and TAP Latin America. I now would like to turn it over for opening remarks to Dr. Felicia Knaul, Director of University of Miami's Institute for Advanced Study of the Americas and a professor at the Miller School of Medicine. I know she worked magic to be here today with us. A past panelist, she's also personally and professionally committed to gender equity and female labor force participation. Following Dr. Knaul's remarks, we'll ask our CEO and President Susan Segal and founder of the Women's Hemispheric Network to address you. Thank you, and Dr. Knaul.
Nancy, I want to thank you again, and Susan, for partnering with the University of Miami. It's an honor for us always to partner with your institution, and especially on this topic, on women in the Americas. This is the first time, as Nancy said, that we've had the joy of being able to host you, and I hope that it will continue to be the case for this forum for many years to come and for many others. When I participated in the third forum in 2016, I still have a memory of how much I learned from that panel, how much I grew, and how I continued to think about that in the years that I've been here at the university. This year's event, as we know, comes at a very particular moment in time. We are just about 2 weeks away from International Women's Day, but we're approaching International Women's Day in a Me Too moment, and as Nancy said, a moment in this city and in many parts of the country where we're seeing, for all of the wrong reasons, how our youth and others can stand up around policies and issues that we all have to care about tremendously. We're seeing how these are flooding through the countries that many of us call home, in my case, Mexico, with Yo También. And I think for many of us, we read through what newspapers, articles, colleagues, and friends are writing about their own Me Too moments. And I thought I would share with you in December, when I had the time in su casa in Cuernavaca to read through some of the editorials in the months prior to December around Me Too, and to realize just how linked our need and drive to participate in the labor market is with the kind of harassment that almost all of us have suffered at some time. If a woman is willing to give up her goal of being a leader, to give up her goal of making her studies allow her to practice the profession to the best of her abilities and the way she wants, then she doesn't often have to face that kind of harassment. But for those of us who continued to fight to be able to make what we studied to be a part of our lives, I think we've all encountered moments where we had to face a kind of harassment that we never wanted to have to face in order to be and become what we try to and want to be. And I've thought a lot about how, I know this particular moment is about leadership and a particular level of women's labor force participation, but we also know that for the vast majority of women in the world, there really isn't any choice. There isn't the choice of, will I go to work or not? Where will I go to work or not? Because most women participate in the labor market because they have to feed their kids. And they participate with no protection, and they work at whatever they can get in order to be able to move forward. And we talk about female labor force participation, and we talk about leadership, but I think we forget often that for the vast majority of women, they're nowhere near that. Their decision to participate is something that leads them into great danger from the time that they go to school and on. I thought I would share with you just a little bit some of my own research, which is mostly around women and health and women's participation in the health labor market. In a study that I did with Dr. Anna Langer a few years ago that was published in The Lancet, we managed to show, perhaps not surprisingly, that women produce the majority of unpaid health care. But we also showed that women today in our world produce the majority of paid health care. You might think as nurses, but in fact, it's as everything. And if we were ever to think about a profession that was male-dominated and looked up to, we might think about the physician labor market, correct? And that labor market has transformed itself, and that education market has transformed itself in a way in which it's truly impressive that in most countries in the world, most of the people studying medicine to be doctors are women. But when we translate that choice, that desire, that conviction to study medicine, the way that it's changed so much, and we look at what the numbers tell us about how those women can transcribe and convert and translate what they've studied into being able to work at the profession they've chosen, you see something very different. The data that we have from Mexico, for example, show that of all the women who study and graduate and become physicians, only 60% actually are able to work as doctors. The many, 25%, are either out of the labor market or unemployed, and many have to work at something else, be it taxi driver, be it nurse, be it caregiver, but they do not have the opportunity to be able to combine what they want to do and want to do well in their own personal lives with the choice that they've made in terms of their profession. That relates to the other part of that labor market, which is the caregiving sector, which is a huge and growing sector, and we're going to see more and more demand for caregiving for the older part of our populations with epidemiologic transition and demographic transition. And I think one of the key questions is, where will that caregiving market go? Not only because of what it means for health, but also because of what it means for all of the opportunities for women to be able to work in the paid labor market. We have some data from Mexico that I shared on the podcast that show that if we look at the group of men and women in Mexico who do some kind of caregiving, you get this very interesting statistic. It looks a little like a Pac-Man when I show this slide. So if you look at how men and women divide their time in a week, what happens with women who work and have to do caregiving is that they're left with less than 6 hours a day for sleep, for relaxation, and for everything else that we need to do for ourselves. The figure for men is more than 10 hours a day. So men have lots of time to be able to spend on themselves, even if they are, and I'm sorry for the men in the audience, but it's true, it really is true. There's no way to get around it. The bottom line is that they have a lot more time to be able to care for themselves than women who choose to be good at what they do in their home, choose to care for their family members, and choose to work. Now, this makes no economic sense. And we've seen this in all the statistics. I don't know if any of you have seen a recent McKinsey study, it's just a few years back, that suggests that if we could have men and women participating equally in the labor market, just according to the best in the region, we would be adding, the statistic is $12 trillion to global GDP. That's an 11% increase in global GDP, just in the lower scenario. In their best case scenario, we actually had gender parity, it would be a 26% increase in global GDP. So it makes no economic sense. But what I want to close with, though, is that this really makes no sense for society. What I think we should discuss, and we need to discuss, is that we would like to have gender parity not only in the labor market, but we also want to see gender parity in our family lives, in our homes, and in our societies. And that's because it is a great gift to be able to be part of a family and part of a community, part of a society. And while it pains me to see how much women have to give up to be able to do both, in a certain part of me, it pains me that men don't have the opportunity to do that. So I think when we're searching for leadership opportunities, we need to think about the leadership opportunities in families for men as well, because without that kind of gender parity in all aspects of life, I think we're going to be fighting what is a losing battle rather than thinking about the win-win situation, which is where we actually have the kinds of laws and instruments and support that are required to be able to do well in all aspects of our lives. I wish you all the very best in the conference day. I'm looking forward to listening to the panel. And Susan, thank you very much for making this your home, the University of Miami.
Death could come quickly. Well, thank you, Felicia. It is a real honor to be here at the University of Miami, to be partnering with you, and to particularly for us at the Council to think about this as our second home here in Miami. For those of you who don't know, we will have a new home of our own premises in a month here in Miami, and we're also very, very excited. So I want to talk a few minutes about the Women's Hemispheric Network and why we at the Council, and I personally, feel so passionate about why we're doing this. First of all, we started this with two amazing leaders, Michelle Bachelet, who just will finish her presidency next month in Chile, and Margarita Zavala, lawyer, first lady, and now presidential candidate. These are two incredible role models in the hemisphere and, frankly, in the world. And we think that they say a lot about what women can do, each of them being very successful, having chosen a path where they do everything and where they believe that they can be whatever they want to be as well as they want to be, and spend as much time doing everything that they need to be incredibly successful. They are both empowering women that look to empower other women. Now, this, as Nancy said and Felicia said, is a very challenging time in Florida, in Broward County, in the United States, and I mourn the 17 young people that were brutally shot and killed last week in Florida. But one of the things that I noted as I watched television and watched the young people that are speaking out for change, is there are as many young women speaking out for change as they are young men speaking out for change. And it made me think, in this sadness, about the great optimism about another generation of young women that are choosing to take the reins of leadership and lead on a topic so articulately, on a topic that is so crucial. And so I come here today to talk a little bit about what we try to do, because what we try to do in the Women's Hemispheric Network is to create spaces like this one to encourage and inspire young professional women to remain in the workforce, to start in the workforce, to set their expectations, to do whatever they want to do and be the best at whatever they choose to do, because that is the path to happiness. It's the path to success. So we started this forum over 6 years ago. Since then, we've had 29 events in 9 cities across the Americas, including our annual conferences in New York and Miami. But more importantly, we've had 2,700 participants, and if I recall, Cara, we've had over 100,000 people tune in to our webcasts. This event used to be off the record. And then we decided, because so many people were tuning in to our webcast and then downloading the interviews that we were doing post the event, that we would change it and we would make it public. And so that's what we started to do last year. Since then, and since the beginning, we've had well over, as I said, 100,000 plus views. Now, what we want to do is create space. We want to serve as a platform for hemispheric leaders to tell their stories, to give advice. We want to help young women create networks, because networks are critical to their success. So today, I just want to say 2 other things. First of all, everybody talks about women, and Felicia said something that's very, very important. To me, having women in the workforce makes economic sense. Women are 50% of the population, but guess what? They're over 60% of the purchasing power in our economy. And so not to have women have a voice in everything makes no sense. And so diversity is critical, because diversity helps economic performance, it helps businesses do better, it makes everyone more successful. And so it makes enormous economic sense to engage women in all parts of the economy. And I'm not just talking about one woman on a board. To have real diversity, out of a board of 12, you need 3 women at least, and we are far from there. The statistics in the United States are still not good, and they are even more bleak when you get to the rest of Latin America. So we hope that by creating these networks, by creating these platforms, we will encourage young women to stay in the workforce, whether they are married and have children or whether they make different choices, but to stay in the workforce. Because if you don't, it becomes much more difficult to pick up leadership in a company, in politics, in the arts. And I hope in my generation, or my daughter's generation, she's 28, we will have not just a few women presidents, not just a few women CEOs, not just a few women leaders, but that it will be her generation that will change the path of the number of women and successful women in the workforce. So today's program is on the record. We are webcasting. I encourage anyone to join in the conversation by coming to our hashtag #WomenASCOA.